I was supposed to introduce him as the Pope from Olive Branch, Mr. President east of the Mississippi of AA. He seems to act like he may clarify some of those statements. There's one gentleman in the back says if he misses anything, he'll come up and straighten things out. So I give you Franklin from Olive Branch.
After that last deal, I think that what you should have done is open the doors of AA and had them to walk down the sawdust trail here. We'd have sprinkled them with this water. I don't know. That moon business still got me bothered. I'd intended to talk on sex tonight. Ramona told me I best not, because I didn't remember enough about it to talk in college. And Tom Breen said if I did, they could arrest me. If I attempted to commit sex, well, they could arrest me for assault with a dead weapon. So welcome to the spiritual meeting. I'm glad to see all of you. I think everybody I see is here. And for this I'm grateful. God, you're a good-looking bunch of sick people. And regardless of what has gone on or what might transpire, I'm glad to be here, so I want to thank the committee. It's really, really great to be wanted, to be asked, because all of us have experienced not being wanted and not being asked. So I never cease to be grateful when people invite me to come and to be a part of and to share. And really that's all any of us can do, is to share. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Franklin Williams. Hi. By the grace of God, to fellowship with men and women like you, and because this program does wait. It hadn't been necessary for me to take a drink today, and for this I am most grateful. I know you're in the borderline of where you give your sobriety dates. We don't do that in Mississippi because we have faith down there. But since there are some Texans, especially one that I love very dearly, Blanche, well, I'll give my sobriety date, 1956. Now, that may not impress some of you, but it impresses the devil out of me and 3 judges back home. and all the police force of several places. Now, that's 21 years, 9 months, and so many days. Say I'm bragging. My mother, on August the 17th, will have 89 years of continuous sobriety. And she never mentions it. And no one, to my knowledge, has ever cooked her a sobriety birthday cake. And she's just as happy as hell. But I mention mine because that's the best record I've got. I never have been sober that many years before, including those first 16. The first 16 years of my life. I'm what I refer to as a pure alcoholic. The book refers to a real alcoholic. Well, I'm a real alcoholic and a pure alcoholic. What I mean by a pure alcoholic may not fit your definition, but it fits mine. I never did get off on the pellets and the capsules and the happy pills and all those things. But I don't deserve any credit for it because I didn't know anything about them. Being an addicted person like I was, I know that had I known about them, I too would have tried them. Or I'd hear people talking about uppers and downers. But I'm the type of fellow, and still am, that if I don't know something, I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to let you know that I don't know. And when I hear you say downers, I thought you was talking about saltpeter. And when you'd mention uppers, I thought you was talking about Spanish fly. But liquor mortis set in with me at a real early age. I never did suffer any of the symptoms of alcoholism. I just jumped right straight into the disease. So I don't know anything about social drinking. I want to welcome this 20 or 30,000 people that came out tonight to hear the great spiritual John from Olive Branch, Mississippi. And they mentioned no picture taking. You're welcome as hell to take mine. and I'll autograph it. I only want you to give me a copy of it where I can take it back to my group. I want them to see this jacket I got on. I wanted it on having 2 Al-Anons at an AA function. And I can remember, I've been in long enough to remember, and Blanche and Ramona can, that it is a struggle to get one on. But for you to have 2 is tremendous. And I never can say enough about Al-Anon. I have to experience something before I know the value of it. I had to lose something before I really knew the value of it. And I think we alcoholics are that way. My wife, Eloise, that several in this room know, last February she had 19 years of sobriety in AA. And about 7 years ago, she came into Al-Anon. She says to learn to live with me. And I am thoroughly convinced that Alcoholics Anonymous takes care of the obsession to alcohol, but Al-Anon takes care of the obsession to the alcoholic. And I am thoroughly convinced that where there are 2 people married who are alcoholics, they both need Al-Anon. Because I've heard Eloise say many times that she learned more in the program of Al-Anon of releasing with love and letting go and letting God than she ever did in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the program of Al-Anon has made the difference between us having a house and a home. Really, Eloise is the best friend I have today. And I've heard Eloise say I am the best friend she has. Eloise was my second wife. Of course, I lost a good many lighthouse keepers. But she had a 10-year-old daughter when we married, and that daughter grew up to hate me. And things were real bad around our house. And since Eloise came in Al-Anon, Blanche and Ramona and several know about this. Larry T. from Illinois. There are many in this room that know about it. That little old girl today loves me as much as she's capable of loving me. And she calls me her daddy. And she introduces me as her daddy. And she comes and talks to me about things that she won't talk to her mother about. And we have a beautiful relationship. So my head is off to Al-Anon. I'm glad I sobered up while I'm still living. Because otherwise you people wouldn't have gotten to know me. I hate to tell you this, but I used to be bad to drink. I mean bad to drink. And bad to drink while intoxicated. And used to get arrested and put in jail for drinking while intoxicated. I know you people up here don't know anything about jails, and that's a bad thing to say to such an erudite group as you. But I frequented them places lots of times by request. And they got to be, now I'd wake up there, Lois, and I knew where I was. Did nobody have to tell me. no matter how drunk I was. There's something about a jail that if you've ever been there once, you know. You know where you are. But I hear people get up and say, I've been in jail 135 times, 110 times, 100-something times. You know, there's a judge in Oklahoma said he'd been in his own jail 17 times. Isn't that humiliating? I don't know how many times I've been in jail. I wish I'd kept up with it. But I didn't know it was going to be a thing of social prestige when I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA liable to come up with a pension plan. And me not knowing my record, I might lose out on some benefits. But it's too late now. I mentioned Eloise. I'm sorry she can't be here, as many of you know her, and she really wanted to come, but that gal had to wait. And I try not to do anything to interfere with that gal's wake. Now, she don't have to wake. Darn it, she can go naked and starve to death if she wants to. That's a decision she has to make. Decisions are bad on me. I had to make a decision before Lois started talking, whether to go to the bathroom or not. And right now, I know I made the wrong mistake. So I don't like to make decisions. The text of my sermon tonight will be keep it simple and follow directions. Those two things have always been hard for me, to keep something simple and follow directions. I still have trouble, and I still have more trouble following directions. Somebody asked me to tell this, and I'm going to tell it, even though we are going to run out of time, but my plane don't leave until Sunday, and I ain't in no hurry. The old boy down in Mississippi kept getting in trouble, and he took a geographical cure, and he went to a foreign country. He took himself with him, and over there he got in trouble. So they had him before the king. And the king must have had a sense of humor, because he says, I understand you're a wino. He says, I'm going to give you a chance to go free. And if you'll perform these 3 tasks in the allotted time, I'll turn you free. So they got 3 tents out there, and the first tent had got a gallon of hot wine. Said, if you can go in that first tent and come out in 15 minutes and have consumed that whole gallon of wine, then in the second tent, I've got a tigress there with an abscessed tooth. And if you can go in there and pull that tigress's tooth in 15 minutes, then you're ready for the third tent. There's a real sexy blonde that the moon is right. And if you can go in there and fix things up in 15 minutes and come out, well, then you can be free. So he goes in the first tent, and in 9 minutes and 32 seconds, he walks out there gagging and spitting, and he had that empty jug in his hand. So he throws the jug down in front of the king's feet, goes in the second tent, and just immediately, you never heard such growling and moaning, and the middle tent pole fell down, parts of clothes began to fly out, and in 14 minutes and 59 seconds, that old wino walked out all scratched up, and all you could hear from the inside was a real peaceful pull. And he walked up to that king and said, Your Highness, where did you say that blonde is with the abscess tooth? I believe the moon's right tonight. That old boy couldn't follow instructions. And I couldn't either. And I almost killed myself before I would get this program down on a simple basis where I could understand it and then follow those instructions. As I say, it's still hard for me. This is the only program in my life that I have found that'll take care of right now. Not yesterday, tomorrow, but right now. And during my drinking, the pain of sobriety was so doggone tremendous that I had to have something for right now. And if I'll keep this program simple and follow the directions, it'll take care of right now. And I don't know where you can beat a deal like this. Profundity never did get me sober. And I don't think it ever got any alcoholic sober. It wasn't these profound things that you said to me. It was the little simple things. So I still try to remember simple things. And I still try to follow, to the best of my ability, the directions. I say that profundity didn't get me sober. I don't believe anything you tell me about living unless you can point it out to me in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you're telling me something about a program of Alcoholics Anonymous, you better tell me something that's in that big book. If I don't know that's in there, I'm going to ask you where it is. And if it's there, I'll believe you. But if it's not, I won't believe you. And the big book tells me the same thing that I've told you. It don't say anything about profundity getting me sober or keeping me sober. It tells me that the spirit of AA will get me sober, and the principles of AA will keep me sober. And sometime in the next day or two, I'll try to talk some about the principles that I think keep me sober. And I think, now this is my opinion, that the spirit of AA will get us sober. And I think you spell that spirit L-O-V-E. Now, if you think otherwise, I'll give you the right to be wrong. But I really believe this. So in talking about simplicity and simple things, I have to bring in my sponsor. I think if there's a weak link anywhere in Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I can only speak for my area. If there's a weak link in my area, it's in sponsorship. We are getting, and it seems to be all over the country, that we are getting alcoholics a devil a lot faster than we can string them. And we are losing a lot of them. And it's my personal opinion that me as an individual member, that I'm not doing what I need to be doing. I'm not sponsoring people like I'm supposed to sponsor. I'm not explaining to these new people the things that I was told to do and the book tells me to do. I'm not sharing in love enough with these people. I don't know about you. I can only speak for myself. So I want to bring in a good deal about my little old sponsor, and I can call his name because he's gone on to the big meeting, David Gates. You didn't know him. But I despised that little fella for a long time, and I came to love him as much as I'm capable of loving another human being. And I want to try to show you how a sponsor, in my opinion, a real sponsor, works. And to me, it's really love in action. One of the greatest fears I had as a practicing alcoholic was the fear of being caught, the fear of you seeing through me, breaking through this shell and seeing the real Franklin, seeing me for what I knew that I was, or I thought that I was. And all of my excuses, all of my alibis, that shell had to be broken through. And this little sponsor, David Gates, was able to do this. And he did not do it with profundity. There was another one that made the first call on me, Marion Hill. He's also at the big meeting, and Marion was quite active at local level. I think they knew him in general service because he was a delegate. And he made a lot of conventions. He talked at a good many. But Marion used to always tell me, you must do so-and-so. You must do so-and-so. And I went to David one day. In fact, David came to me. He's always coming to me. And I said, David, Marion's always talking about these musts. And I said, oh, Alan. Now, Alan had more degrees than a thermometer, but he couldn't stay sober. And he's always telling me the reason I couldn't drink is because my capillaries was out of balance. And I didn't know nothing about capillaries. So I'd go and talk to David, and he had a pat answer. I could ask him what time it was. He'd say, don't drink, go to meeting, read the big book. And so I'd go back and ask him about them capillaries, and he'd say the same thing. And I'd say, David, I can't find nothing in there about them capillaries. He said, it must not be important. Don't drink, go to meeting, read the big book. And I said, now, Alan tells me that all this must stuff, that's a lot of baloney. That I can take this thing like I want to. I can do it cafeteria style. He said, well, I'll tell you this, old son. He called me son, and I called him son, too. But after I learned to love him, I dropped part of it. He said, son, for your benefit, the word must is in the big book 74 times. Suppose you read it and see what it says, but I'll tell you this. If you want to stay sober, you must become willing to stop drinking. And he says, alcohol, in our opinion, never causes anybody any trouble till they swallow some of it. And said, rarely have we seen a person stay sober who continues to drink. Now, that's the kind of profundity I got. I said, David, that makes sense. Why hadn't you said that to me before? And he is always saying, read that big book. Don't drink. Go to meeting, read that big book. I was unemployed, unemployable. Wasn't no way for me to get a job. I said, David, you know I can't buy no big book. I can't get no job. Want nobody to loan me any money. I can't get no book. He said, son, go steal your big book. Said, we got a step in this program. By the time you get on to it, you can make amends for stealing. He said, you must become willing to go to any lengths. And said, maybe this is the any lengths that you had to go to. She had to break down all my excuses. I said, David, this is fine. This program is for you religious people. But I'm an agnostic. I didn't know what an agnostic was, but it sounded good. And he gave me an excuse to drink it. He said, son, that don't make no difference. You just got to make up your mind whether you want to be a sober agnostic or a drunk agnostic. He said, now what next? I said, David, I ain't got no job. I ain't got no wife. All you people got jobs. You got nice threads. You got nice cars. You got nice jobs. If I had all those things, well, I could stay sober too. He said, son, turn to page 98. He is always having me to read to him. I read to David for 5 years before I found out he could read. And he pointed out there in the middle of page 98, said, wife or no wife, job or no job. Our sobriety does not depend on people, but in our willingness to trust God and clean house. He said, turn over to page 99 now, at the bottom of the page. You know, it said the same thing there. He said, that must be important. Said they figured that some cat like you was going to miss it on page 98. So they put it over there on page 99 and 100, and they thought maybe you could remember pages 99 and 100 better than you could page 98. Said, let's go back and read it again. And you know, I had to explain it to him again. I was always having to explain things to him. I said, David, I ain't got no faith. He said, no, I don't guess you have. He said, you're not going to have any faith until you apply these steps to your program. And says, when you do, when you accept the fact you're powerless and then find your power, and then turn these things over to that power and do these house cleaning steps, then you're going to have some experiences, and you'll know where it came from, and that'll give you faith. And that's the only way you're going to get it. So I said, David, you're always talking about God's will. I said, I don't know what God's will is. He said, no, I don't guess you do. But said, you know what it ain't. and said, you just do that and you may get good enough to where people will associate with you. I said, David, I thought. He said, now there you go. Don't think. Don't think. That's a mistake. I said, David, you got signs all over all these club rooms. Think. He said, that's for us. Said, that's not for the new person. Said, thinking is the worst thing a new person can do. Said, if you think, I'll have to come down and get you out of jail. Said, if a new person thinks, he's going to take the path of least resistance. And said, after you get sober and apply these things, well, then you can pay some attention to that sign up there. But until then, you don't. Now, that's the kind of profundity I got. He used to take me to meetings every night. And I don't say do this with every person, because he took me for a long period of time. And I know if somebody takes us, and the book tells us, if they take us too much, we get dependent on them. He finally told me, he said, you could get to the liquor store, now you get to the meetings. But he'd take me, and I didn't know what open meetings and closed meetings was and all that, and I certainly wasn't going to ask him. So he said something about us going out to a meeting that Wednesday night. And he said, now this is going to be a closed meeting. And I said, you going to talk? Because David was always talking everywhere I went. And I asked him if there's anybody else that talked. He said, nobody else you need to hear right now. I said, you going to talk? He said, no. I said, they're going to call on everybody. And I thought, well, that's wonderful. They're going to call on me. And he said, I said, they're going to call on me? He said, yeah. David believed in action. He believed everything he did, get on your feet. So he said, when they call on you, you get up on your feet and say, you're an alcoholic, your name's Franklin Williams, and you're a member of the Quonset group, and you sit your ass down. He said, you done told them people all you know. So I started this thinking business again. I said, I thought. He said, I done told you not to think. Said, when you go home tonight, if you wake up around midnight and think you got to go to the bathroom, you call me first. Said, you make the wrong decision. I always say this about a sponsor, and this is based on my personal experience. If after 60 days you like that sponsor, you got the wrong sponsor. Because that sponsor is not telling you the things that you need to hear. Not knowing the truth, done you killed me, and it could have killed me. And I think it is my responsibility and my obligation when I sponsor somebody now to tell them the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Where else are they going to find it? Where else are they going to get it? And I think maybe that's why in my area we're a little bit lax. There's too much pussyfooting around. This is a terminal illness, and we've got the solution to it. And if we are not going to tell them the solution and try to explain this thing with them and put our arms around them and walk with them and show them the way, how in the devil are they going to get it? And another thing, if you've got a sponsor and that sponsor is telling you to do things, you check him out. You go to the big book. And if what he's telling you is not in the big book, you get you another sponsor. Because that sponsor can kill you. And also, in my opinion, I got a lot of opinions. Get you a sponsor who has waked or is waking the steps. How is somebody going to tell me how to take the fourth step or the fifth step or any other step if he or she hadn't taken it? Now, they call me hard-boiled in my group, and they say I'm right down the line. Damn, I like for them to say that, because I like to try to do and try to pass on what I have learned from a textbook called Alcoholics Anonymous. And a textbook, as old Wesley says, is something you study. And then after you study it, you apply it to your daily life. Many of you may not know this, but way back when Bill was was talking before the American Medical Association. I know of 3 talks that he made, and there's a pamphlet that Beth knows about and many in AA know about. Bill's talks to the medical profession. I've forgotten the terminology that's on it, but that's what it is. The 3 talks that Bill made to the Medical Association. In the first talk in the pamphlet, at the bottom of page 7, Bill said, and I quote Bill, that Dr. Silkworth told me that I had a neurotic compulsion to drink, that no amount of willpower, no amount of education, and no amount of treatment could check. They didn't say cure, couldn't even check it. So that strengthens what I believe about the disease of alcoholism. And it reaffirms what Bill says in the book, that we have an illness which only a spiritual remedy can conquer. And says once the spiritual phase of it is helped, the mental and the physical begin to clear up. Now, I'm not saying that a drunk comes in and don't need to go to a doctor. I'm not saying that. But I am thoroughly in accord that with me, that when I began to work on the spiritual end of this thing, things fell in place for me. I told David, I said, David, I'm one of the 25% who's mentally incapable of grasping this thing and of getting honest with myself. He said, we won't argue that one bit. But son, let me tell you this. If you're honest enough to admit you're dishonest, you're honest enough to make this program. And if you got sense enough to tell water from whiskey, you can find a way to stay sober. And these are the things that broke through this old shell of me and let me know that David saw through me. And I figured if David did, or others did. And what David did to me reminds me of a story. I hate to tell a story. But this old drunk down home came into the club room one day and saw his buddy over there, and he said, Bill, said, you know, old John caught me in bed with his wife last week and hit me over the head with a 2x4 and said, look at this gash here. He said, did it knock you unconscious? He said, no, it didn't knock me unconscious, but it sure as hell scattered my ideas. Now, that's what David had to do to me. He had to scatter my ideas, and he did a darn good job of it. And he told me many things, but there are many things that he told me that I remember. I couldn't get along with people, and I said, David, how do you get to where you can really be free and loose and get along with people? And I fought the God thing for a long, long time. I mean a long time. So David told me, he says, if you want to learn to get closer to God, you learn to get closer to people. And if you want to learn to love God, you learn to love people. How do you do this? This program is so devised that if you will take these steps in the order that they are in the big book and apply them to the best of your ability, these things slip in the back door, and they happen automatically. And I have found this to be true. It's by getting this program down simple enough to where I can understand it, and then getting up off of my duffy and following some simple instructions. I have come to believe that the first 9 steps of this program will surrender any person who takes it. I don't care whether he be agnostic. I don't care whether he have a job, no job, wife or no wife, or whatever. It'll surrender any person that'll take it. And the book bears this out, because what are the promises after the first 9 steps? Those promises on page 83 and 84. The last of which is beautiful. We come to realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. This is a foolproof program. If I'll keep it simple and know what I'm doing, and then follow those instructions. And just maybe I'm not explaining to these new people like David explained to me. And I hope you can see the relationship there that David and I had over those years. 5 years ago, David went on to the big meeting, and there's a big void left in my life. I guess I was closer to David than I've ever been to any human being. And I think we are afforded that opportunity in this fellowship of developing real close human relationships, one with another, in sharing in love. See, David wasn't doing these things for me, for anything in return. And golly, what he got in return. See, he told me I couldn't do these things by myself, that of myself I was powerless, and said that's what I would admit in step one. Now, if I was powerless, I was going to have to get a power outside of me. And then the way I would be able to do these things was with the help of this higher power. And I have certainly found this to be true. As far as I'm concerned, I can sum up, and this is another thing with me in keeping it simple, I can sum up this whole ball of wax of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous with 6 words. And I like to have something short that I can think of every day. And these 6 words are trust God, clean house, and help others. I don't believe anything unless you show me what comes from the book. But this is in the big book, not just in that simplicity, but as simple as I am, I had to get it down. In the 11th chapter, the last series of sentences and words goes about like this. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you have found and join us, and we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And surely you will meet some of us as you trudge the road to happy destiny. Trust God, clean house, and help others. And then didn't Bill tell us, and this is on page 98, let us instill in the hearts and minds of every new person that they too can get well if trust God and clean house. And then didn't Bill also tell us that the greatest immunity, or the surest immunity against not drinking, is working with others. So this is where I got it, from a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. Trust God, clean house, and help others. There's a lot I don't know today, but there's a lot more that I do know today than I knew over 22 years ago when I came here. See, I did research work for 9 months after I came. I came in January of 56 and got sober in October of 56. But they kept talking about mental obsession and physical allergy, and I didn't know what these were. And David turned to the mental obsession and had me to read that we are possessed of an obsession that someday, some way, we're going to find a way to defeat this thing. And then he explained it to me. He asked me why did I switch from one alcoholic drink to another. He said, I know why you got off on wine. You got off on that for financial reasons. And I might say, if there are any winos in the crowd, that wine, it just does something to you that this other stuff don't do. I believe if I was drinking wine tonight, I could understand that full moon. I couldn't do nothing about it, but I could understand it. So I had to go back and think of something else that was simple. And I thought about when I was in college, and I tell you this to let you know I'm educated. And Eloise says I'm educated way beyond my intelligence. Well, we were going out freshman football, had a big old boy named Red McGinnis. The more I tell this, the bigger he gets. The way I remember it now, he's about 6'4", weighed about 230. His arms came way down below his knees, and his wrists were way along up here. He had the biggest hands I ever saw. And he had old bushy red hair that stood out like barbed wire. And when Red McGinnis said something, that was law. And I found it out the hard way. But I smarted off to Red McGinnis in the grill one day, and the next thing I knew, I was getting up off the floor. And every time I'd try to get up, Red McGinnis knocked me down. And I never laid a hand on him, and he darn near killed me. And that was nearly 50 years ago. Well, tonight I have no mental obsession whatever that I could say something smart to Red McGinnis and get by with it. I absolutely, unconditionally surrendered to Red McGinnis. Nobody had to read me Dr. Tebow's Act of Surrender. I just surrendered. But you know it wasn't that way with alcohol. He'd knock me down time and time and time again. And I'd get back up and say, you ain't gonna do it next time. I'm gonna switch over here to this gin. I'm just gonna take drinks at such and such a time. I even bought an alarm clock one time. They told me I was drinking too fast. And you know, I knocked the alarm clock off and broke it. Seemed like it was $1.25 alarm clock then. I just said to hell with it. And I went on drinking. But I tried everything because I had an obsession. But really, Red McGinnis kept that obsession from developing with me. But let me tell you what I think is an obsession. We had an old boy down there that was bad to shoot out windows. When he was a little bitty kid, he made him a slingshot, and he'd shoot out windows. You got him an air rifle, and he'd shoot out windows. Got him a 22, he'd shoot out windows. Got him a 410, shoot out windows. Older he kept getting a bigger caliber outfit, but still shooting out windows. So he got to be such a problem with the police that they finally had him before the judge, and the judge told him, said, next time this happens, said, I'm going to send you to the penal farm for 1129. And sure enough, right back, and they sent him, shooting out windows. Judge would go out there to see him, said, son, I hope you learned your lesson. Said, you're not supposed to shoot out no windows when you get out. So the day he got out, he went out and got him. Riding back to town, he said, son, said, what's the first thing you going to do? Said, I'm going to get me a good job. And I'm going to get some money in my pocket. And I'm going to buy me a set of wheels. And I'm going to get me some nice threads. And I'm going to pick out the best-looking gal in this county. I'm going to get her in that new convertible. I'm going to get out here on a lonely road and park it. I'm going to get out that back seat and get out there on it. I'm going to pull off her panties. And I'm going to pull the elastic out and make a slingshot and shoot out every damn window in this town. Now, that old boy had an obsession. You know, the police talk to me, the judges talk to me, the church people talk to me, psychiatrists talk to me, them psychologists talk to me, my mother, my loved ones, my friends talk to me, but you know, they didn't get rid of that obsession to drink. And the only way that obsession was removed was by me taking a program and getting it down simple, the way my sponsor taught me, and following them directions. And God removed that obsession. And I just hope today, and I think today, that I have an obsession today not to drink, but to stay sober. And I think today that idea of staying sober overpowers any other idea which comes into my head. Now, if you know of some other way to remove an obsession, well, I doubt it'll work, because we've tried them all. I know I did, but I know this one will work. Why did I come to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous? That may not be important to you why you came, but it's important to me. Well, one reason I came is because I couldn't afford private treatment. If it had all these detox units, I'd have detoxed myself to death. I'd have sobered up 8 or 10 times a day, getting detoxed, and then go right back out and get toxed. And so maybe it's best for me that they didn't have all these things. But I remember my last drunk, and I came off of it cold turkey. I'm not saying that that's the way that you ought to come off one, but I sure as hell remember mine. And I remember it today, and I remember it so vividly that I don't want to go through that experience again. But there's some other reasons why I came. There may be 4 or 5 reasons. I don't know the importance of them except the first one. This is a suggested program. A judge suggested that I come to the program by Alcoholics Anonymous. He gave me a choice of going to the penal farm. So I figured I had more to offer you people than I did the penal farm. So that's why I graced you with my presence. Another reason, my bride of 22 years had left me. And I thought maybe if I came back, she might come back. And another reason, I'd run out of sponsors. I mean sponsors that each out that lettuce. And there wasn't anybody that I could put the touch on. So I thought I could come in here and con some of you slicks out of some money. And then I'm sure I wanted to quit hurting. To say I don't know the order of importance except that first one. But all of these things materialized in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous except getting my first wife back. So I tell people I work with all the time, if you ain't got no wife, don't worry about it. You can get your nullin in AA. I met Eloise in the program and we got married. And if you're a man and can't find a wife, devil, I'll give you Eloise. This is a program of sharing. So this is why I came. And I came working people, and you know it didn't work. Until I got down to where I became willing to do anything to stay sober. It don't take much of a man or a woman to make this program, in my opinion, but it takes all of them. Thank God this program is not competitive. But the book tells us half measures avail us nothing. We had an old gal in our group that she came up pretty rough. And back then, you couldn't hold an office in the group until you'd been sober 90 days, and you couldn't talk outside of the group until you had been sober a year. Of course, now they come in, they're sober one day, and they're counselors the next day. In some places. Now, this old gal, she had waited that 90 days just to get to read the portion of chapter 5. And so the time came. And she got up there and got to the book and got on there to half measures avail us nothing. She said, half-ass measures avail us nothing. We knew what she's talking about, and she did too. So it says half measures don't avail us 50%, avail us nothing. So that tells me that I've got to put everything that I have into this thing. I haven't talked about drinking, but I drank for 29 years, from the time I was 16 until I was 45. Me and 2 brothers stole a jug of corn whiskey when I was 16 years old, and I got drunk and I got sick and I blacked out. 29 years later, I stole a jug of wine. I got sick, and I got in trouble, and I blacked out. So in 29 years of drinking, I didn't learn a successful way to drink. Now, if any of you want to know how to empty bottles, I'll meet you afterwards, and I can really tell you that. But not a way to drink successfully. But by the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have found one day at a time for right now to go without taking a drink, and to be somewhat comfortable with me and with you and the God of my understanding. And I gauge each day of my sobriety by how comfortable have you been today in those 3 areas. If I've been comfortable in those 3 areas, I've had a good day. If I hadn't, I had to go back and examine and see where the fault is, and it's always with me. And then I have to do something about it. The last drunk is the most important drunk I ever got on, because this is the drunk that got me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It wasn't the worst drunk I'd ever been on. Didn't last as long, and I don't think I was as physically sick, and maybe not as mentally sick. But it is the drunk that got me to surrender, to throw in the towel, and to honestly and sincerely ask for help and become willing to accept that help. I had attempted suicide. I had stolen a piece of plastic hose, and stealing was a way of life with me, just like drinking. I'd borrowed a car. I'd hooked up that plastic hose to the exhaust of that car, and it started the engine. And a peculiar thing happened. I got thirsty. And I got to thinking about that little spot of wine that's in my apartment, and what a shame to leave this cruel world and not polish off that last drink. So I left the car running, so I'm told, and I went in and polished off that last drink. And a peculiar thing happened. I passed out. Now, it just happened by what some people call coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences. The lady who was letting me live in her garage apartment as gratis was late coming home that night. She saw that hose hooked up to that car, came down, opened the door, and got the key out and took that hose off. I'm glad she did, because I understand it's against the law in Tennessee to commit suicide. But anyway, I passed out. And somewhere around 1 or 1:30, the morning of October the 15th, 1956, I waked up. I didn't come to, I waked up. I'd come to many times and reach down by the side of the bed and get that which would slip me back in the arms of Morpheus. But I waked up, and I saw things in a different perspective from what I had ever seen them before. And God gave me a moment of clarity there, a moment of truth. And my whole life passed before me. And I no longer blamed people and conditions for what had happened to me. I knew where the answer was. And I fell to my knees, and for the first time in my life, I said a sincere prayer. And I don't know what I said other than God help me. But evidently I said enough and stayed there long enough to make a decision and to make a contract. And I think I took the first 3 steps on my knees that early morning of October the 15th. I admitted that there wasn't any way that I could successfully drink alcohol. There wasn't any way that I could keep from drinking. Therefore, I was powerless over alcohol. Now, if I was powerless, I needed me a manager. And you told me in step 2 who my manager was. Now, if I was powerless and need the manager and got me a manager, it made sense to me that I'd turn my life and will over to this manager, and that's what you told me to do in step 3. And that's what I attempted to do that night. And I realized also that before this God I didn't understand was going to move my house and live with me, I was going to have to first clean it up. And that's what you told me to do in steps 4 through 10. So I set about to do these things. But let me back up a minute. I slept soundly until around 6 or 6:30 that morning. And that's not like a drunk, to sleep soundly. And I waked up and went to the back door of this apartment and asked this kind old lady if I could use her phone. And I called David, and I said, David, I've had an experience that I don't understand. Come over here and let's talk. So he did, and he sat down on the end of my bed, and we talked. And I told him what had happened. And he just smiled. And he says, you've got something real there. And said, let's hang on to it. But says, you've done some things from what you tell me that they're going to get some of your time. And sure enough, they did. In 2 days' time, they took me to jail. And it wasn't my first experience, and then they sent me to the penal farm. While I was out there, he told me, he said, you don't know anything about this God, but you tell him you don't. But you've got some friends that do. And says, you tell him that you're going to report for duty every morning for him to tell you what to do and give you the strength to do it. And says, every night you thank him for doing that. And said, you're going to be going to school, and you play a game that you are going to school. And while you are out there, you prepare for a little test that you're going to have every day, because your real exam's going to be when you hit the streets. And you be prepared to fight those lions and tigers when you get out. So I played that game. And I tried to sober up every drunk that came to that penal farm. I tried to sober up the warden, and he didn't even have a drinking problem. But we started a group, and that group's still going. And I'm privileged to go out there now and walk out and hear that door clang from the outside. And maybe I've carried the message to some of those boys, because some of them are sober today. And 1 or 2 of them have stayed in our home with us during the while that they were working out there, until they kind of got enough money in their pocket where they could get them a pad that's away from the old places that they used to hang out. So I went about doing these things that the book told me to do and that David told me to do. And I went along for 9 1.5 to 10 years, and I began to get uncomfortable. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. All I can do with you is share with you what my experience has been. And this is what my experience was. I began to get resentments. I began to get self-pity. Fear began to creep back in my life. There I was, a president, the Pope, and owned my own group, and told everybody what to do, and I was just as uncomfortable as hell. And I went to David one day, and I said, David, I've got to talk to you. So we began to talk. I said, David, what must I do? And he grinned and said, don't drink, go to meeting, read the big book. And then he said, no, there's not but one thing to do. Let's start at the front. We did. That Saturday, we went out on the lake, and we spent the day out there. And we started. David asked me if I could take the first step 100%. And I said, yes, I can. I know that during the last several years that I've somewhat disregarded the unmanageable part, because I can see now that I have been trying to manage this life. And you know, up until then, when we got on to the second and the third step, as much as I had talked to people, as many people as I had sponsored, as many times as I had read the big book, I didn't know that Bill suggested that we take this step with another human being. And I didn't know that he offered a suggestion for a prayer in that of fathers. And David said, let's do this thing exactly as the big book says. And he said, let's turn your book to page 63. And said, I want you to read me what the prayer is in there. And so I read, and I won't give you the exact words because I try to remember it in my words. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me what thou wilt. Take away or relieve me of the bondage of self, so that I may better be able to do thy will, and to take away my difficulties, so that victory over them will bear witness to those that I might help. May I always do thy will. And David and I were leaning down. David believed in praying, and he believed in getting on your knees to pray. And we were by a log. And David says, do you know what you said? I said, I think I do. He said, I'd like to hear it in your own words, and I think God would too. So I said it in my own words, and I had my eyes closed, and I looked up, and David was looking me square in the eye, and tears were running down his eyes. Tears began to run down my eyes, and two silly, adult, old men hugged each other. Now that's love, and that's love in action. David said, I like that, and I believe God likes it. He said, now let's get on with the fourth step. Now he had given me a legal pad some 9-10 years prior to that to write an inventory on. I think the first one I wrote was on a 3x5 card, and he tore it up. But I wrote the next one, and I wrote as good an inventory as I was capable of writing at that time. And I took as good a fifth step as I was capable at that time. But I think in nearly 10 years' time, I'd maybe become a little bit more honest. And some things were coming up in my memory that I had forgotten about. And apparently I hadn't done anything about these things. So I went just exactly by the big book to list my resentments, list my fears, my sex, the whole deal. Then how it affected me. And you know, I found out that the greatest emotion that it affected me was fear. In nearly everything, my fear was affected. And I also found out that fear is where self-reliance picks up. And David told me, said, you admitted up there in first step that you're powerless by yourself, you're nothing. That you've got to really grasp on to this power greater than you and ask him to help you and to do it. And said, let's just go by exactly what the book says. And I also found out this, that the thing that motivated me to do all of the wrong things that I did was an attempt to satisfy a human ego. And you know you cannot satisfy a human ego. We alcoholics sure as hell know it. A little bit of nothing never was enough for us. A little bit of whiskey, hell, I wouldn't give you a nickel for one drink. a little bit of money, a little bit of sex, a little bit of whatever you want. You cannot satisfy a human ego. And then David explained to me. He said, Franklin, that's what this deal is about. It's getting rid of self. Said God cannot use you until he first destroys you. He's got to get rid of self. Then when he does this, amen, sister. When he does this, then God can use you as a channel for his love, for this love to flow from him through you. So I wrote that fourth step to the best of my ability. And then David and I went back to the lake, and we spent a whole day, and practically all of it was talking about this fifth step. And when we finished, David said, here's the book, turn it to page 75, and let's see what it says, because let's follow those instructions. He says, now you go home, and you get in a quiet place, and you read the first 5 steps of this program. And then you think real hard and ask yourself, have you left out anything? Have you omitted anything? And if you have, well, put it down and come back and we'll go over that. And said if you haven't, well, then you are ready to take step 6. So we read on page 76 that we ask God to let us become willing to do these things. And then further on page 76, when we come entirely ready, well, we say something like this to God. And David had me to say it to him in my own words, where he and God both could hear it. That God, I am now ready that you take all of me, the good and the bad. Remove every single defect of character which stands in my way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me the strength to always do thy will. See, I can't do this thing by myself, and I doubt you can do it by yourself. That's the reason all of this is in the book. And if I'll follow these directions and do it sincerely and honestly to the best of my ability, these things will happen, because they have happened to me and they've happened to countless thousands. Bill says in that to these promises after step 9 that they have materialized with all of us, sometime quickly. It depends on how willing we are to wait for these things. So he told me, says, when you've done that, you've completed step 7. Says, then you're ready for 8 and 9. I made the list of the people that I'd harmed, and then he had me to read again on the same page, on page 76, that if I didn't have the will to go out and to make these direct amends, to ask God to give me this will. And I did this, and I can honestly and sincerely tell you that I have made direct amends to every person that I know that I harmed, except where to do so would injure others. So I went on to step 10. I try to do this. You hear me? I say I try. Continue to take a personal inventory, and when wrong, promptly admit it. Sometimes promptly with me can mean 10 days, or sometimes 2 weeks. But I'll tell you this, when old Franklin gets to hurting enough and gets uncomfortable enough, he does it. And I know what to do today, and we all have different tolerances of pain. And when my pain gets bad enough to where it bothers me, I do something. Now, many days I do it on a daily basis, but some days I don't. But I'm not going to go too long being uncomfortable anymore, because I know how to get comfortable, and I've got me a manager now, and when I'll turn these things over to him and do the simple things that you have taught me to do, I know what happens. So thought through prayer and meditation. I haven't worked for the last, well, let's say I never did work, but I've been retired about 11 months. I've had a lot of time on my hand. I was talking to somebody about this today, and I've had a lot of time to meditate. And I think I've learned more in the last 11 months about meditating than I ever knew. And I get to thinking about the power of this program, and it scares me. It really does scare me. This thing is tremendous, and I know that I And I doubt any of you will ever really sap very much of this power, because it's a darn much there. There's more there than I can ever get. But I've gotten enough of it to where I want some more of it. And today I'm willing to go to any lengths to try to get this. And as long as I stay in that frame of mind, I'm going to get some more of this power revealed to me from God through you people. Because I know the source of this thing is God, but the channel of it is you people. Love flowing from God to you. And if I'll keep myself spiritually fit, well, then it can flow from me to others. And the 11th step, I know what to pray for. Sometimes I pray for things, and I guess it's all right if I'm willing to take yes or no for an answer. But I'm supposed to pray for His will, and I do that most of the time. But a real important thing for this old boy that I've gotten from the 11th step is to come to realize and rely that God is. And I am coming to believe, and Webster says to believe means to rely. I am coming to rely on the forgiveness of God for yesterday and the grace of God for tomorrow. And that only leaves me today. And when I can get up in the morning and make a contract with God and ask Him to send a drunk to me and to give me the strength to do His will that day, I have a beautiful day. And I can do this a lot of days, a heck of a lot of days. And God is so good that when I don't do it, I have something to compare to. And I want some more of this thing. And I go do it. Having had a spiritual awakening, that scared the devil out of me when I first came in, that spiritual awakening. I said, David, what's that thing? So he turned out the book and had me to read. There's nothing but a personality change, but said, you ain't got nothing to worry about. You ain't got no damn personality. Said, you just do these things and maybe people will learn to associate with you. So having had a personality change as a result of the first 9 steps, we tried to tote this message and practice these principles in all our affairs. Tote what message? Step tells us the message of spiritual awakening as a result of the first 11 steps. It's the only message I've got. And I believe it's the only message that you've got if you work in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's what the step says the message is. That's following them instructions. Tells us what it is. How long do I have this thing that I have tonight? The book tells me a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And how am I not going to best maintain my spiritual condition if it isn't toting this message and practicing these principles? What principles are we talking about? It all boils down to one, love. Practicing love in all of my affairs. I do something for somebody because I love them and don't expect anything in return. And ironically, when I do this, I get a devil a lot more back than I ever put out. Practicing love. That's the thing all the ministers, all the rabbis, all the priests, the apex, all religions is love, the ultimate. And I have been around long enough and have experienced and seen the miraculous healing power of love. And it's fantastic. It's unbelievable what prayer and love can do. And I just hope that maybe, instead of being addicted to alcohol, I'm becoming addicted to this love that I have found in this beautiful fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know I've talked too long, but I want to end up with my football story that I always give. But first, let me say, how did I get this thing? Did I earn it? Heck no. No way I could earn it. By the grace of God, an unmerited gift of God. Now, I think I can best tell you about what Jesus told his disciples some 2,000 years ago. See, I've heard of that cat too. He said, ask and ye shall receive, seek and you shall find, and knock and the door shall be opened unto you. She's heard it too. So I asked for and received a spiritual release from a spiritual illness. And I sought, and knowing not what I sought, I found you people who cared and people who understood, and real important, people who could communicate, and people I could communicate with. And I knocked, and I used willingness as a key, and The doorway was opened unto me, and I stepped through the archway, and there again were you people. And in finding you people, I found love. In finding love, I found God. And peace and happiness and serenity slipped in the back door. My football story, I like to think that maybe tonight that my manager, God, is saying unto me, Franklin, I'm getting up a football team. I'm going to make you the quarterback. I'm giving you 11 men on this team that you met in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you'll use these men, they'll block out resentment, self-pity, intolerance, impatience, all of the stumbling blocks that have caused you so much trouble during the first 45 years of your life. In the backfield, I'm going to give you 3 men that you lost during your active alcoholism, and I'm going to give them back to you in the reverse order in which you lost them. I'm going to give you hope, faith, and charity. In the line, I'm going to give you 7 powerful men. At the 2 ends, I'm going to give you patience and tolerance. 2 tackles, I'm going to give you honesty and humility. And 2 guards, I'm going to give you unselfishness and gratitude. And in the center, I'm going to give you willingness. It'll be necessary that you use willingness on every play. Now, this game is going to last a lifetime. There'll be no timeouts. And any decision I make is final, so you can't question it, because I'm not only your coach, but I'm the sole official. I'm going to have to give you some ground rules. And the ground rules are the 10 Commandments. The first 4 of these commandments have to do with your relationship with your manager, God. The last 6 have to do with your relationship with your teammates. Now, the goalpost are the gates of heaven, and the ball is your eternal soul. Now, get in there and play ball. Ladies and gentlemen, I need each and every one of you in my search for truth in this game of life. And if you don't think this program will work, just keep it simple and follow directions. And if you don't believe God will help you, just ask Him. Thank you, and God bless you.